mean, if you throw in, like, if you make it like a cat coffee shop, although that would be hard for people with allergies. But if you just throw in some animals, I am so down.
You're there. Okay.
Yeah.
If we ever get to incorporate animals, I'll be sure to send an invite.
Yeah. Goat coffee shop. I don't know. Maybe that wouldn't work. Maybe the mini goats. Anyways.
Okay. 1, 2, ready, go.
Welcome to the Called to Be Bad podcast. My name is Mariah Martin, and I feel called to be bad. It turns out I'm not the only one. Join us as we dig into all things bad, scandalous, deviant, you know, the stuff that makes good church folks squirm in the sanctuary. Why? Well, because sometimes the scandalous is spiritual, deviant is divine, and bad is beautiful. Say yes to the call, and let's see what holy trouble we get into today. Hi, Melissa.
Hey, Mariah.
Welcome to Called to Be Bad.
Thanks. I'm excited to be here with you.
So this is Melissa Spolar, and Melissa is an MDiv graduate of Azusa Pacific Seminary. She is in the process of transitioning out of a pastoral role at Pasadena Mennonite Church in Southern California as she pursues a dream of planting an alternative church. Ooh, I'd love to hear about that. She's an Enneagram 5. I'm Enneagram 4. Who loves to question why we do what we do and also loves board games and swing dancing. Yeah, so Melissa and I, we are going to talk about what it means to be a bad church. And of course, on this podcast, when we say bad, that means, well, it could mean a couple of things. So we'll get into that. But before we dive into what it means to be a bad church, I'm curious what you are drinking today, Melissa.
Yeah, I have my lazy mocha, which is just half coffee, half hot chocolate, and I've got it in my In-N-Out mug representing Southern California.
Perfect. That's how I started drinking coffee, I think, was mixing it with hot chocolate.
Oh, nice.
I think, do it. Yeah. I have a memory, I think, of writing a paper, and my mom came down and had a little bit. It probably was decaf, but she had some coffee, like special coffee, and I was like, ooh, I felt like very, like, adult. And now I just drink black coffee and hot chocolate sometimes, but I haven't mixed them in a while. I'll have to try that again. So I am drinking decaf coffee. This is the afternoon, and so I was like, I don't know if I want to do another full caffeinated coffee. So I have decaf, and I have it in this new mug that friend and fellow baddie in the podcast, Rachel Stolpe, gave me, and it's got a chicken on it. At first I saw it, and it said "Rise and Shine," and I was like, oh, that's nice. And then I saw the chicken, I was like, yes, okay, that's why she got it for me.
Great.
Makes sense. Yeah, so that's what I'm drinking today.
Great.
Hello, beloved baddies. A quick break to tell you that this episode is sponsored by the Center for Art, Humor, and Soul, a nonprofit that supports and amplifies the voices of edgewalkers through art that catalyzes change, laughter that brings us together, and soul awakening to the creative spark within us. The support from the Center for Art, Humor, and Soul has meant the world to this podcast, so I highly encourage you to check out their website, arthumorandsoul.com, to see their other featured artists and projects. If you want to support the podcast, you can check out our Patreon or get in touch. Now I'll let you get back to this episode of Called to Be Bad. So, bad church.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean? I mean, most people know what a church is. I don't think that that's something, that definition that we need to dig into. But when we are talking about bad church, what does that mean to you? And also, what does it mean to be a good church?
I think, distinction. To start with good church, I would say most Western Protestant spaces anyway, most people would define a good church as having a weekly service that primarily revolves around a sermon, and then there's a small group ministry and kids and youth group ministries. Like, bare minimum, I think that's what most people would say defines a good church. And then, bad church, there's a lot of thoughts that I have around what that could entail, but what I'm passionate about is paring down a lot of what we do, and for it to look more like a gathering, like a simple gathering rather than a service, and a lot less going on. And so to get there, I have a couple thoughts to share that, like, what what got me to that point of ready to try something different. I think it comes down to two big things. So I think less and less churches and people have the energy and resources to keep up the sort of standing model that we've had for the past handful of decades. And I also don't think it's working as well as a lot of us would like to think that it is. But I know I say that, like, it depends on what you define as something working, right? Like the purpose of a church is something that you're probably going to get a lot of different perspectives on. And so that's something, for a local body to define. But I've just been in spaces where I'm like, man, we're doing so much and it's so hard to keep it all up. And I don't know that we're always even asking why we're doing it all and what we could be doing less of.
Yeah. So the amount of like programming activities and maybe like different groups, what are they called?
Like the denominations and stuff? Or you mean like the age groups and...
Well, the age groups, the like leader teams, like different teams, like leadership team, elders or whatever. So all of that structure adds activities and time, and then all of that takes volunteer work and energy. And so you are, would it be too much to say that like all of that can lead to burnout? And then
I would say, definitely in my case, it has. I think, for decades, churches had a lot of funding, lay involvement, enough staff. And so I think it became the norm that church was this like very encompassing thing for a lot of people. But culture has changed a lot, like church attendance has dropped. People have a lot going on. And so I feel like now we're left with all of this structure and programming in our like understaffed, overcommitted churches. Yeah. And to me, it just feels like this sandcastle that we're constantly laboring to keep alive. And not asking like, do we just let it wash away?
There's a biblical reference there.
Is it? Oh, I guess, build your house on the sand. I didn't think about that.
Oh, I didn't know if that was, I thought that's what you were hinting at, but
I didn't even make that connection when I said it.
It's a good connection. Yeah.
Yeah. And I've been in a good amount of different contexts, right? Like I grew up in a small evangelical church in my 20s. I was a part of a lot of different denominations and a mega church, like non-denominational context for a while even. And then the past 5 years, in the Mennonite world. And so, I've really hunted around, I would say, for something different. Whereas I think even in all of the contexts that I've tried, I think at the end of the day, the way we've shaped church over the past handful of decades is sort of this checkbox of like, go to service, be in a small group, tithe, volunteer, check, I'm part of a church. I have some beef with that.
With like checking off the checklist is like, this is what it means to do church.
Yeah, I think both for just how much obligation we can make church become about. But I also think like as far as, and I'm not going to try to get into like what is the purpose of a church, but I am against the way that I think these structures make it easy to be a really passive participant in a church body. And I kind of steal that language. There's this author, Frank Viola, that I really like. And he has this book called Reimagining Church. And he uses this phrase, fostering passivity. Like a lot of what we do fosters passivity for most of the church body. You have one person talking most of the time at a group of people. In most churches, you have like one person or a small group of people that's sort of carrying the weight and like the labor of spiritual formation for an entire community because of how we've set it up. So I think it's really easy to sort of stand on the sidelines, but still consider yourselves part of a church community. And I find that problematic. And I do think also it can really easy fall into consumeristic issues and mindsets.
Yep. Yeah. And like church as entertainment, like it's something I go do, consume, witness,
as opposed to like a community you're really a part of. Yeah.
And it's hard because then those who do treat it as a community and put a lot into church, often a lot of the burden falls on them to keep the church running.
Absolutely.
And then church is a chore.
Exactly.
Church is not fun anymore. It's not not that church has to be like fun, but it's not life-giving. It's life-sucking.
Right. No, I know exactly what you're saying. It was funny because I went out of town a few months ago for a friend's wedding. And I remember telling my friend, you know what's strange? I'm bummed about missing my weekly swing dance gathering. Mm-hmm. I'm not bummed that I'm missing church this weekend. And to me, that's sad. Like, it should be reversed. Like, I should be bummed to miss out meeting with my church community, not bummed to miss out, dancing with a group of people I don't even know that well. Mm-hmm. And so, which has led to questions of like, post-COVID, it's a lot of people have had a hard time coming back to be in person. Like, they might, tune in on Zoom or online. But I'm like, man, if what we're doing doesn't feel worth showing up to, why are we doing it this way?
Yeah.
And then, we have all these people that are rushing to fill gaps because they do care. But we create so much of, like, there's so many tasks that it takes for us just to get together once a week. And I push back against that. I'm like, do we have to make it this hard to get together once a week?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, this is just a very specific example, but I always question, like, why bulletins? Like, why? We don't change the order of service, basically, ever. It's the same one. I don't even pick up a bulletin because I know what's going to happen. And I just, like, it's a little bit perhaps generational because, we get it in an email, and so I don't need a printout version. I can look at it on my phone if I need to. I guess maybe so it's less like a bulletin or community announcements and more like, why do we need a printed order of service when it never changes and it's just like one more thing for someone to do that it just seems unnecessary.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah, we have, for us, we've moved away from bulletins, but making the PowerPoint each week is a big task that one person carries. It's a paid staff person, but it's a lot of hours that goes into putting together this PowerPoint so that we can have this more elaborate service week after week.
So is the PowerPoint like for the songs to be up on the screen? Like, is it an accessibility thing or
liturgy, call to worship, all that kind of stuff. Pictures to go in the background of other parts of the service. And,
which is nice, but that takes a lot of
just more
effort,
more things to do. And I, to share a little bit about, if we're good for me to share what it is that I do aspire to.
Sure. Well, let's see. Have we gone through everything? So, like, I'll ask it this way, like, what would you cut out, before we get into, like, how you would envision church, like, what would you cut out of, like, what do you think is the bare bones, what would you pare down in church?
Yeah, and this is where without explaining it, I get people that get really intense reactions to stuff that I say because I want to pare down to not even having I want to rephrase to saying having a gathering, not a service.
Okay.
For that gathering to not revolve around a sermon. And this is probably one of the more controversial ones, but I want to experiment even cutting out extra ministries like small group ministry, youth group, children's ministries. That's probably one of the more controversial things that I've said.
Yeah. I mean, I'm right there with you. I'm not like clutching my pearls because I'm like, that sounds great. I don't know if it's just like because I'm a pastor and I'm tired. Except for I do struggle because I love sermons. I love writing I like studying for a sermon, writing a sermon, and giving a sermon. And I love the like sermon response and Sunday school. Yeah. What were you gonna say?
Let me add this that you might appreciate. So when I first started years ago, first started questioning some of this stuff and saying it out loud and, wondering like, man, could our gatherings together be more interactive rather than listening to a sermon, and wrestling with the question of like, but isn't teaching really important? And like, okay, it is really important. Like we have to have sort of common things that are shaping us as a community. So my thought is that the teaching is released as a podcast for people to listen to during the week.
Well, would you look at that?
And then the time where we're actually together, we're getting to wrestle with what was in the podcast or what this passage it was based around. But like the big thing, so like with the idea of passivity, right? So the idea that we're protecting the time together so that no one's a passive participant. The time together is protected to be together, to be engaging with each other. And so that's a big part. And a big part of why we have to send, well, at least in my mind, we have to send kids away and sometimes youth away because the sermon is, it's going to be too much for them to be able to engage with.
Can't keep their attention.
Well, if that wasn't the cornerstone of our weekly gathering, would we have to send them away?
Yeah, and then it could be more intergenerational and family-friendly. And
yes.
Okay, I love that for many reasons. One, just like podcasts, like hello, and that there's a time for teaching, but also that you can listen to it on your own time when you want to. And like for me, I struggle during live presentations because my brain has a hard time like paying attention. So I love pre-recorded things because then I can listen to it on a higher speed while I'm doing something else and I can pay attention better. Like that's why I always tell people like, you can watch YouTube videos on a faster speed and listen to podcasts on a faster speed. Like that changed my life when I like learned that. Like if I could just speed up everyone's talking, that would you would be able to pay attention better. Anyways, so the point is, you can do things on your own time, in your own way, and then come back together so that everyone is an active participant.
Yeah, I think
active participant in community.
Right. And I think to me it's just rethinking, what are the things that you can do on your own? And then things that you can't do on your own, let's protect that for the time that we're together. And and then we're helping also then protect our time together to be developmentally accessible for more people, kids alike, or even, people at different developmental levels. If we're not revolving around a sermon, if it's more about conversation and engaging with each other, that's just going to open up to a broader group. So
what about singing? I guess we can just let you go ahead into like how you would picture things.
Yes. So my dream for the weekly gathering is that definitely music worship. I think communal music worship is great and very important. For me, it would revolve around like music worship, communion, but shared in a potluck style time of eating together rather than like a single moment. And then engaging with each other. So like, discussing the podcast, the passage, whatever we were focusing on that week, sharing about life with each other, praying for each other. Which, I mean, the whole idea of how we would do this inevitably is going to change even the setup of the space that we have. I mean, it really is like a total pivot of how we do things in a traditional church service. Now.
So would you meet in different people's houses? Like where would be the building or space?
My personal dream, I mean, I think there can be a lot of cool things with house churches. I have the dream of opening a coffee shop church.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Which is kind of a loaded term, right? Like people have done it, and it, from my experience, the ones that I've encountered, it's mostly been like, we just have basically a same old worship service, but in a coffee shop, which is that's not what I mean. Like to me, the idea that like even the setup of a coffee shop makes so much sense for the way that I envision this happening, right? Because there's little clusters of tables and chairs facing each other so that you can sort of naturally gather into groups, from 2 to 5 or 8 or whatever, depending on people's sort of social preferences. But and so, space affects so much about the way that you gather, right? So you have a group of people all facing a speaker on a stage that conveys something to you. If you walk into a room and you're just at clusters of little tables and couches and chairs, that conveys to you like, oh, this is a space to engage with each other. And so I think that's a really important part of it.
And that's different from the kind of like church with a coffee shop attached.
Absolutely.
Which has its own vibe to it. Yeah. I mean, if you throw in like, if you make it like a cat coffee shop, although that would be hard for people with allergies. But if you just throw in some animals, I am so down.
You're there. Okay.
Yeah.
If we ever get to incorporate animals, I'll be sure to send an invite.
Yeah. Goat coffee shop. I don't know. Maybe that wouldn't work. Maybe the mini goats. Anyways. Okay, so there would be like small groups together
Mm-hmm.
It wouldn't necessarily be like, I was picturing like one big circle, but it's like, okay. So then
Yeah, I
it's
think
like smaller
that's
groups.
hard, like depending on the size of a group. I mean, if you're meeting in a house church and you just have like 10 people, that might be feasible. But,
Right.
you know, if you have more than 10, 15 people, it gets hard to really carry on like deep conversation, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. This is reminding me of for one of our episodes on sex positivity, I talked with Rebecca Anderson, and she pastors at a bar church. And
okay, I'm gonna have to go back and listen to that episode then.
yeah, she talks about it at the beginning. We don't go super in depth as to like what the setup is, but people share stories, and they affirm that as the word of God. Yeah, but it would still, I think that would still be like a stage setup where everyone's facing one person rather than like small group. But I'm just like, I just, it's fascinating, this idea of church being in not a church building.
Right.
Which honestly, like, so much of funding goes into these often gigantic buildings that have what, maybe 50 members, and you know, like, all of a sudden if you have to pay for a new roof or like, not that, yeah, anyways.
Yeah, the cost of maintaining a building is so much, and you know, depending on what your church has going on, you might utilize that space like 5% of the week.
Right.
And you know, churches are getting creative now, trying to figure out how to rent their spaces out. But you know, part of my thinking with the coffee shop church and trying to escape, I know this might sound counterintuitive to build a business in the name of anti-consumerism, but I have a point.
Yeah.
Part of my thinking is if the coffee shop business side of it could be successful enough that we're not actually hiring church staff, that could further eliminate this idea of like, oh, church is this consumeristic place. Like, I tithe and then this is what I expect in return. And you know, we're hopefully doing something that creates a great space of community and safety rather than just a building that's going to be sitting empty most of the week.
So the funding would come, so the church would be funded by the coffee shop, basically, instead of tithing.
Yeah.
Is that what you were saying?
My dream world, I co-own this coffee shop with a great entrepreneur business partner that handles all the business side of things. And I handle community events during the week and then the church gathering on Sundays or whatever day it would end up being. That's my dream world.
That's it. Well, I love that because I feel like that's so true for so many like artists or creatives. They're like, okay, I need my business partner to like do like follow through on all the things. Like, I come up with all the ideas and I have the creative part, and you like actually make it happen.
Yeah, I mean, I have a background in event planning, so I'm like, I can handle all the community oriented stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, if anyone out here is listening from the LA area that wants to do the business side of a coffee shop,
Melissa's hiring.
Let me know.
That's awesome. Yeah. Okay. So I'm interested in like the layers under this model. Like, why is this bad? Meaning, why is this a better, like, how could churches benefit from this model other than, you know, people are tired and burnt out? Like, is there a deeper theological or just, I don't know, social emotional level that this would meet more needs maybe than how churches right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think I will say that a big part of what's on my mind when I think about this stuff, like, I just feel very drawn to like the deconstruction crowd, right? The people who are like, okay, I believe in God. I think I kind of want to pursue this stuff, but you know, and I know there's a lot of reasons people have left church, but there are folks out there that I've interacted with. They're like, I believe in God, and I do think community is important, but church is just, it's too much work. Like, you have to go to a service, you have to join a small group, you have to like volunteer. It's just too much for me. But when I've talked about some of my ideas, they're like, oh, we just meet and have like meaningful conversation and have, you know, communion together and worship. Like, yeah, I would do that. And so to me, I'm like, you know, I think about how Paul says, I want to be all things to all people. And if there are people out there saying, I want to encounter God in community, but just in simpler ways, in ways that actually like make sense for our society and how busy lives are, and Yeah, in a way where I think this is another part of it too, in a way where it's not sort of one person or a small group of people getting to sort of control and protect everything that's said and shared, but it's us coming together and wrestling about life and, you know, social issues and just the ways that our faith actually play out in the world, that we're coming together and we're actually wrestling through those together, not just letting someone, you know, talk at us and hope it sticks and makes a difference, but we're going to get together and as a community, we're going to really enter into doing that work together. So I think sort of the opposite of passivity is what I'm chasing after is, yeah, how are we actually shaping each other to take ownership of our faith and how we participate in God's kingdom? And that's probably the biggest part for me, is that church would not just be a passive thing, but a place where we come together and we're really being formed and taking part in something.
Mm-hmm. So there would be, is this like the emphasis on creating a community, an active community, if you will, or is there then also, like, is this getting at the heart of like what it means to maybe follow Jesus or be a church together? Like, is there kind of like a mutual aid element to it, or is that like you're like, hold on, let me just like get my coffee shop started and then we'll go from there?
Yeah, I'm sure there's plenty of details that maybe as it happens, if it happens, you know, a need might arise and we have to talk about how are we as a community actually going to care for each other in tangible ways. There are certain things that I feel pretty comfortable to say, all right, we'll wrestle through that as a community together when we get there. For me, I'm more of just starting of like, yeah, where are people at in terms of what they're seeking to help them grow their faith and, you know, engage with their faith in an intentional way? And how could we just create a space to actually meet that and make a reality?
Yeah. I like how this kind of counteracts what I think gets some churches and people in leadership in trouble, is this kind of power hierarchy or like pastor worship, which, you know, we're gonna talk about like idolatry, but anyways, of like the pastor is the most important person in the community, and the power dynamics that come with it. This feels more mutual, more kind of, I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, of course there would still be, you know, myself or maybe other people who are, you know, with a theology education to be doing that teaching, you know, by podcasts, like people that sort of are equipped to like give context, background to scripture and things like that.
Sure.
And you know, to give credit to the church that I'm at now, we have lay people preach all the time. We have, you know, sermon talk back time. So I think we get little tastes of it. But I still find it interesting that most of the time we get together, we're giving the floor to one person sharing their thoughts on something in a way that it feels really easy then if a guest were to show up that day and not like something that was said in the sermon to be like, oh, this must not be the church for me, because there's a lot of power given to a microphone. And we do see that time, that weekly time we're together, we view that as like, you know, the key part of the church. And so I'm interested in like how like decentering any times we're all gathered together.
Okay. Yeah. That would be neat. So kind of along those lines of people who are deconstructing and have almost deconstructed out of church altogether. Like I've talked with people that are like, you know, I want community, but I don't want kind of all the like that my theology has to line up a certain way, or that I have to say, you know, I believe in God, blah, blah, blah. Oh, I totally lost where I was going. Oh, so like if it is this hard to do church together, why are we doing church at all? Like we don't have to go into like what is the purpose of church? I don't know. But like, what keeps you hanging on? You know, why are you still doing this work? What potential do you see here?
Yeah, I mean, I fully believe that Christian community is an essential part of our formation and discipleship. You know, you see it in Jesus's life. You see it in the epistles, like this call to pursue despite conflict towards unity in Christ. You know, iron sharpens iron. Like, it's clear in Scripture that it's important to be with each other, even if it's hard. And, you know, that's something that I've experienced and benefited from. Absolutely. Like, I would not be the person I am today without the church communities that I've been a part of that have helped me to grow, to see my blind spots, to learn from each other, support each other. And, you know, even right now, I'm transitioning out of my church role in a little over a month now. And I'm going to be taking a break from organized church for a while, but I've already started to meet with a couple friends on a weekly basis just to, you know, share about life with each other, what's going on, pray for each other, because I really do believe that's essential. Like, it's just something that is personally beneficial, and it really is part of our formation.
So Christian formation and that sense of spiritual community is what keeps you coming back.
Yeah, I mean, I just think, you know, if I were left to my own devices to just read Scripture and figure out what it meant to follow Jesus well, like, I wouldn't do a good job by myself, because all I'm going to bring into it is my own bias and thinking about how we're supposed to show up in the world. Like, I need other people to help me figure out how I'm supposed to be doing that. I can't just read the Bible and figure it out myself. Like, that's why we have each other to help us, to know what we're supposed to be doing in this life. And
yeah. Well, I ask everyone this question that comes on the show, but what would you say if someone told you that you were a bad pastor or a Christian, or, you know, insert whatever identity here, for being passionate about this, like, kind of alternative model for church, the bad church?
Yeah, so I mean, I haven't had anyone use that language yet, but I can tell you I have had really intense reactions from some people. I'm not trying to generalize, but most of the people that have reacted really negatively have been in the older demographic.
Okay.
But really intense reactions to the idea of not doing a sermon in the time that the church is gathered together. Like, really intense reactions, almost like being accused of like heresy for saying that wouldn't be the key piece of the gathering. And really intense reactions about experimenting with kids and youth being with us and not having separate programming for them. So one thing I try to practice is encountering their intense feelings with curiosity. So trying to understand, like, why do you feel so strongly that is essential to what it means to be a church? But I have to say, I've had times before where I had an idea that someone else thought was crazy or awful, no way it was going to work, and it just took me doing it for them to realize that it was possible, or maybe even good. So I feel pretty comfortable to say, if there are some of us who feel that what we're doing now isn't working for us, then let's try something different, and we can adjust and problem solve as we go. And I also feel very comfortable knowing that there are, you know, different strokes for different folks. Some people thrive in very liturgical environments or programmatized environments. But yeah, my heart and mission is to create space for people like me who are very burnt out from the structure of organized church, yet want to pursue Christ alongside intentional community. And if that's not for them, that's all right. They can stay in their organized church, and that's okay.
Yeah, I heard that there was this church that had these little what are they called? Like the phone cards, business cards? They had like little business cards at the door of their church, and it had a teacup on it with some tea, you know, steaming tea. And on the back, it said, "Not your cup of tea." And then it had like a bunch of different churches in the town. Cool. So it's like, if you don't like that church, you know, here's other places that you can go, which I thought was a really, I don't know, I just thought that was a cute idea. Yeah. So why do you think, I'm just curious why this person was so bent out of shape by the idea of removing the sermons or having like more intergenerational time?
Yeah, I mean, so the intense reactions I had around not doing a sermon, once I shared my idea of doing the podcast teaching during the week, they were a little bit more open. Like, okay, I guess as long as there's teaching, but I do think there's something to getting to listen to the same thing. Like you go to a concert, right? And you listen to a band. There's something about getting to do that together that's just different.
Oh.
Okay, that's fair, I guess. But also like there's like a rock star that is just so amazing to see as opposed to just, I don't know, a human sharing their view of scripture. And then, as far as kids and youth ministry, when I tried to ask like why does that feel so important to you, like so key to church for you? And they've said like, well, that's how it was when I grew up, or that's how it was for my kids when they grew up. And I didn't want to push too far on this, but what I find really interesting is that some of these people who reacted so negatively, like their kids like left the church. And so I find it interesting that, people can feel so strongly about this. And yet, you and I were raised in this generation that there was so much going on in churches, right? There's Sunday school, VBS, and youth group. Like there's so much going on. And yet so much of our generation left the church or has like lost their faith altogether. So I just find it interesting to say, oh, this is essential to raising disciples. It didn't work for a ton of people, but it's essential. I'm like, Paul, I don't know that that's essential. And I think about family gatherings that I had when I was growing up, right? Which so different from church service these days, right? You don't have people planning these like elaborate pieces of the gathering. It's just people that like the biggest task is like making food and then showing up to be together. And I just remember like lively conversations about politics and all sorts of things. And, us kids or teenagers were there, maybe we weren't always super engaged. Maybe we were sort of playing while people talked. And I think what people maybe want to give more of a chance to is that even if some of the things might be going over a kid's head, like they're still listening and they're still being shaped, right? I was shaped so much by my parents' politics. I never once was sat down and like given a class on their political views. It was just being around all of their conversations. And so I just really want to wonder, could that be true for faith formation? Like, do we need to have these like classes and separate programming, or could it happen a little bit more organically by being around each other in a community? And I've had people quick to say like, no, it can't. I'm like, well, have you ever seen it happen? Like, have we tried it?
But why?
Have we just tried it?
It I wonder if those kind of intense reactions are reacting to the idea of change. And when it feels like the world around us is so shifting and changing, and like, people aren't wanting to go to church anymore, they're losing their faith, I think people want to hang on to something that they recognize, and church has been that constant for so long. And so the idea of what church looks like changing, I'm guessing feels scary. It feels like this this is a world that they don't recognize anymore. And it's like, that's almost a scarcity view of like, what are we losing, rather than the kind of energy that I'm getting from you of like, okay, but well, for one, what do we have to lose? And also like, can this be an adventure? Can we experiment? Can we see where this goes? Can we see if this is life-giving and if this actually nurtures people, and go from there?
Yeah. And on that note of nurturing, right? Like we had talked about church sometimes feeling like an obligation, and there's so much that we put on what it takes just to get together once a week. And I had a really great conversation with Katarina Friesen,
who's going to come on the podcast.
I was there in the promo for this season. It sounds like you're going to be interviewing her about Wild Church in Fresno, everyone's going to hear a lot about that, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But I had called her, just wanting to hear what it's like to start an alternative church. Like, is there hope, basically?
Yeah.
And something that she said really stuck with me. It was something along the lines of, I didn't know it was possible for church to be a restorative space, even for pastors.
Oh.
Yeah. And I remember I was in the thick of burnout at the time thinking, oh, I want that. Like, I want church to be a space and a community that the whole body wants to be a part of, wants to show up, where it doesn't feel like an obligation. You know, from the pastoral side, where Sundays aren't just this whirlwind of problem solving and thinking about so many things. And again, like we said, church, it's not that it's supposed to be easy, right? Like, we're not called to have an easy life, but we can be in spaces that help us grow and challenge us. But can we do it in a way that does make us feel alive and inspired and rejuvenated? I hope so. That's what I want.
A sustainable church.
Yeah.
Like, I'm getting, like, my dad was a pastor growing up, and I have vivid memories of him coming home, and it was, like, almost like this, like, game or, like, fun ritual we had that he would lay down on the couch, and I'd go and I'd, like, help him take off his boots, and then he would turn on the football game. This is sounding so, like, I don't know, like, American-y, but I don't know, that's what it was. And, you know, we'd all cuddle up and, like, watch football, and he would be asleep in, like, a minute. And he was just so exhausted after church, like, so spent. And now I come home from church, and yeah, I'm spent. I'm, like, ripping off my earrings, getting in comfy clothes as quickly as I can. Like, what if Sunday afternoons you'd be, like, energized or feel, like, refreshed?
Yeah.
Oh, that would be beautiful.
I know. Can you imagine? I had one of those mornings.
I can, but I can't. But
I had one of those mornings yesterday where I showed up to the church building, and it was just one problem after another. Like, the printer was out of ink. There was all this stuff that needed to be printed for kids ministry and for the service, and like, there's some construction getting done. They had left stuff all over our kids area. It was just sort of one problem after another, and probably 20 minutes or so into the service is when I finally was able to, like, go and be present. I wasn't preaching or doing anything for the main service that day, so it kind of worked out that I was able to help code problem solve all that stuff. But it got to the point where I'm like, okay, it's been an hour straight of, like, a whirlwind of problem solving. I'm gonna go and try to sit and enjoy or participate in this service now, I guess, but then I have to leave soon to set up some youth stuff, and I'm like, I hate this. I don't want my time with my church community to be this, like, adrenaline rush and problem solving and thinking about 5 different things. Like, I want to come and be present with my church community. But the way that we do it now just makes that really hard.
Well, I think I wonder if a lot of us pastors, if a lot of, like, our calling or our desire to be in ministry is, like, maybe being curious about scripture, maybe a desire to help people and be around people and, you know, just walk with people in their lives or, like, talk about faith. And then we get put into these positions where we are now program directors and we are tech experts. We're running Zoom. We are, you know, like, herding cats. Herding cats. It sounded like I said herding. No. HERDING. Yeah. Anyway, like, we're just running around, like, going nuts. And you're like, this was not the calling that I signed up for.
Right. And I can't even, like, someone will come up to me clearly wanting to have a conversation or make a comment about something difficult in their week. And I'm like, in a dream world, I could stop and be really present with you right now and talk to you about that. But I have to go take care of, like, 3 things really quick. And by the time I come back, service will have started or you'll be gone, or, you know, I'm like, something's broken here, I think.
Yeah. I've been grateful for my spouse, because I've noticed that, you know, he goes around and talks to everyone before the service. And, like, I mean, that's just, like, part of his personality. And I'm, like you, like, running around doing things and not as present, but he actually can be present. And I'm like, man, you do pastoral care better than I do.
Yeah, that's great.
Not your job. Yeah. Oh, man. No, I'm excited by this idea of a bad church, a church that flips around what it means to come together, what it means to be a body, what it means to worship and be community. The church may look different than how it looks now, but we may have to You know, like, I mean, we did an episode on the death of the church, and I just love Ian McPherson's words of like, yeah, the church has to die, and we are a people of resurrection, you know? Something's going to die, and hopefully we'll rise from the ashes, and something new will be born, something that is sustainable and life-giving, and I don't know.
Yeah.
I was going to say holy, but not that it's not holy now, but like just something that's like, I don't know, inspired, but...
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, you know, there's so many churches, you know, I was on a pastor's retreat, I don't know, half a year ago or so, and there were some of the pastors I was talking to there were like, man, some of the stuff you're saying sounds great, but I can't upset the status quo because that might threaten my income, which I don't want to, I'm not turning my nose up at that. Like, that's a very real reality of someone's full-time job is pastoral ministry, and they don't know what they would do if that got, you know, that income got threatened. I think that's a bummer. I think that's sad for that to be dictating what you do, but it's a total reality, which is fair.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, and maybe for churches, you know, I think I want to go too extreme to where I don't think I can just find a community that has been operating this way and is ready to go this drastically in the other direction, which is why I'm looking
convert them to like, hey,
my church, we had a lot of conversations about my heart, and you know, we ultimately decided like, okay, what you're saying sounds great, it's too far for our community. Okay,
it's not us.
I will find people that do want to create this from scratch, and that's okay. But
yeah,
you know, for some churches, like maybe it is just a little bit of paring down, right? Like having conversations about what do we really need, what is actually shaping us, and then how do we give ourselves permission to let go of anything else. Like it might not be as drastic as going to start a coffee shop church, but giving ourselves permission to breathe and let go where we need to.
Yeah, and that's hard because I think it's there's a grief there of letting go of something that has been maybe safe and comforting for some folks.
Yeah, absolutely.
But also, like, I think a lot of the same people, I don't know if this is too much to say, but I think a lot of folks grew up feeling like they needed to go to church because to go to church means you're a good person, and you need to be a good person because you want to go to heaven. And so you tithe and you put in volunteer hours and you sacrifice yourself. You pick up your cross and you carry it because that's what it means to be a good Christian. And so what if you can still be a good Christian or a good person by being a bad Christian and going to this bad church, or
removing, you know, a lot of the checklists that we've added to what it means to be part of a church.
Right. If you don't go to church to save your soul from hell, if you no longer believe in hell, what does church mean? Again, we're getting into like, what is the point of going to church? Maybe we'll have to do a whole episode of like, why?
That's messy.
What is the point?
I'll be honest, I don't even know that I have some of my thoughts, but I definitely don't feel confident to say.
You're like, those
for
are
the whole world,
thoughts.
what is the point of church? That's a deep one.
What is the point? Well, if your thoughts ever solidify, maybe we can have you back on and discuss.
Sounds great.
Discuss further. Yeah. Cool. Well, I'm excited about your coffee shop church. And if you ever need someone, pulpit supply, to fill in your podcast preaching, I like that. That's got a ring to it. Let me know, because I'd love to do that.
Oh, thanks. I absolutely will.
Yeah.
We're probably
cool.
a ways away, though. I mean, probably a good year or two from it becoming a reality, at least.
Yeah. Any final advice or resources or thoughts to share?
Yeah, I would say if you're really interested in this, and the whole idea of sort of deconstructing the way that we do church, there are 2 books, both from Frank Viola, that I really recommend. So Pagan Christianity, which he co-wrote with George Barna. Amazing book, basically just traces Jewish and Christian practices from the Old Testament till now, or till 2001 when they wrote it. And it helps you to understand why we've solidified certain practices today and why we feel like those are like the canon of what church is these days. And then Reimagining Church, where he basically just takes some various, Western Protestant church practices and, picks them apart, sort of wrestles with them alongside scripture and just thinking practically. I want to give the caveat that I don't agree with everything he says. He's like a little bit anti-seminary, which I definitely don't agree with.
Oh,
but there's so much good content in both those books. Like, I have just, the theology geek in me has come out so strong reading both of them.
That's awesome. The theology geek is real and alive. I don't know. But yeah, Pagan Christianity, that title is intriguing. How very, so I don't know, heretical of you.
I know.
You're like, it's on brand. It's just, it's, yeah.
Yep.
Cool. Okay. Yeah, I'll check those out. Well, it's tradition on the podcast to end with a blessing. So would it be okay, Melissa, if I bless you and all of our baddie viewers and listeners out there?
Yes, please. Absolutely.
Okay. Melissa and all of you baddies, may you go from this episode with a spirit of curiosity and excitement and adventure to discover what church, what gathering together could look like. Can we open up our imagination and have a vision for something new, something sustainable, something life-giving? Maybe something that involves kittens in a cafe. Amen.
Amen.
Man, I would love that. Or a rabbit cafe, and then you could help get the bunnies adopted, because maybe people would be less allergic to bunnies. I don't know. There's something there.
Have you watched the cat? What's it called? The show about the cat cafe with the.
There's a show about no. I mean, I've heard of cat cafes
from Big Bang Theory.
Oh, really?
She has a show where she owns a cat cafe.
Oh my gosh!
It's a really cute little show.
Cat cafe. I'm looking it up. Perfect. Thank you for coming on, Melissa. This was a fun conversation. It sparked my imagination for sure. So.
Thanks, Brian. I'm glad to hear it. And yeah, glad to be here.
That's all for this episode of Called to Be Bad. Keep being your bad, beautiful selves, and I will see you next time.